Hello champions, you're a champion already. Welcome to my YouTube channel. You're going to discuss about EY, Capgemini and Air India Java developer interview questions. Today we are going to discuss about the scenario based questions which they're going to ask you based on the project you're working on. So gear up to face rejection, small steps every day leads to big results. The first question is, how can you configure a Spring Boot application to run on a different port without modifying application.properties file? Without modifying. So in application.properties file, you will definitely have server.port which is configured usually. So you don't want to modify it, then how do we do it? This is by one way is command line arguments. When running a Spring Boot application, you can pass runtime arguments java -jar, your app name, and server port, where you can specify the port you want to run. Other one is programmatic configuration. Then you will be having a class where you've used an annotation @Spring Boot application. There you can create a Spring Boot app is equal to new application and set the default properties. Then you can define a singleton map where you can provide the server.port and the value which will be taken. So these are the two ways where you can run on a different port without modifying the application.properties file. The second scenario, which is a very frequently asked question and a very common question, is like they will ask you, if you have used a Spring Boot application, can you use two databases in it? Two different databases have you used? So what is an answer to that? If you say yes, then the next question is, how do you achieve this? So if you say yes, or you have already worked on this kind of code in your project, then you will definitely have to explain on this. So the first one is you need to configure two multiple data source beans. So first bean is data source 1, and that would be the primary one, and there you can define the URL for the first data source, and the second bean is for data source 2. There you can define the URL for the second data source. The second, after creating the beans for data source, you have to create multiple transaction manager beans. So the first transaction manager bean is for data source 1, and the second transaction manager bean is for transaction manager 2. So each data source needs its transaction manager to handle the transactions for each database. So you now have the data source beans. Now you have a transaction manager bean. The next one is you need to use that annotation @transactional, and the transaction manager 1 can be used to interact with database 1, and transaction manager 2 can be used to interact with transaction manager 2. So you have a data source bean, you have transaction manager bean, then you can use @transactional annotation to use this transaction manager and make use of the databases respectively. Okay, you have made a move in the right direction. So the next one is a scenario where you can add a dependency to the class path without using pom.xml. So usually in the pom.xml you will have all the dependencies present there, and that will be used while running the Spring Boot application. So in order to add a dependency to the class path without using pom.xml, you can use the command line's class path specification java -cp, the dependency jar you wanted to add, and your application name. So here the external dependency.jar is added to the class path dynamically. The second option is to use the Spring Boot Maven plugin. So when you have this Spring Boot Maven plugin to build a executable jar that includes the dependencies, by default this plugin packages your application and its dependencies into a single jar file, simplifying the deployment. So Spring Boot Maven plugin that can be used. So that's progress worth celebrating. The next scenario is, what are the strategies to handle the peak time traffic in a Spring Boot application? So this is a very common question. So when you say you have an application like Amazon and you have a holy sale that is happening, there is a lot of customers accessing it at a time, there is a lot of people accessing it, there is a peak time. So how do you handle it? This happens for every application. This is a very common question. So the strategies to implement this is, first one is load balancing. So you need to have a distribution of traffic across multiple instances of your application using a load balancer. It could be a cloud-based one. So if you have deployed near it's a cloud-based application, then you will have a load balancing in your cloud like AWS, GCP, or whatever it is. Then the second approach which you can use in the Spring Boot application is caching. So you have an annotation at the rate cacheable for the database calls, which is generally frequently accessed data which can be cached and that can be used. That is a very common one, and it is a very huge topic. We can discuss this more in a separate video, but this is a very important one. They would be definitely asking about caching. Then the rate limiting, it is to control the rate of request to your application to prevent the abuse or overloading. So you can use Bucket4j or Spring Cloud Gateway to implement the rate limiting. Usually most of the Spring Boot applications will have a gateway, and you can configure the rate limiting there using a rate limiter filter or however you're using it. Then you have the asynchronous processing. So to improve the responsive and handle long running tasks by processing them asynchronously. So when you have this annotation async, the process will be run on different threads. So to run the methods in a separate thread, you can use the async annotation. Then the next one is connection pooling. So connection pooling is to configure a connection pool for your database to manage a large number of concurrent connections effectively. So in Spring Boot, you can configure it like maximum pool size and minimum idle time, or everything can be configured. The sixth point is monitoring and scaling. So you can use tools like Grafana to track the application performance and automatically scale your application. So that's all for today. So these are the 4 scenario based questions which will be asked based on your project. So thank you for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Get rejected, face rejection. The emerges growth. Keep learning. You are already a winner. Thank you.